All right, welcome back to Last Week Chopped Up. I'm here actually with my boy Nithin, who you know from the Special Haters Ball edition. Jeremy couldn't make it this week, so we just hate. We'll see if the balance works because, my wife was saying that she liked how you kind of brought a component where me and Jeremy are agreeing with each other too much, and you bring a component in. So we'll see if we're casting for controversy. In fact, she has an alternative name suggestion for the podcast, which I have not shared with you, which we use internally in my house, which is called the Man Yard.
The Man Yard. All right, I could go with that. I can go with that. I'm not going to hate on that one yet.
Right? I think she kind of brought it up with a little bit of obviously humor in the mix, but I'm thinking like, that sounds just dumb enough to work, like Man Yard. That sounds like a whole corporation. So I told her that's like Disney,
like it.
Like Man Yard.
Yeah, that's the big brand. That's the umbrella organization that we're all going to be owned by at some point.
That's right. Is Last Week Chopped Up brought to you by Man Yard Enterprises, a Man Yard corporation.
Right. And we got multiple jurisdictions to traverse. So
that's right.
We're going to need a bunch of holding companies.
That's exactly right. We gotta plan for success. We gotta plan for success. So what's up? You're out there now in Houston. What's up? How's
That's
it going?
right. Yeah. In Screwville.
Okay.
We got the screwed up click.
Okay. I don't know why I asked. Well, you have that in your closet at home. Your parents' house?
For sure. I had to rep when I'm back home in H-Town. So.
You do have like the most Houston gear of anyone I know by like such a long margin.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. When I was younger, a friend of mine was like, "Hey, get me a screwed up click shirt." And this is back when they were just selling them out in like Acres Homes and stuff like that, where you can't get them like on Etsy or something, So they didn't have drop ship back then. So I made a pit stop out in the real Acres Homes, and it was a cool look because that's definitely as part of Houston. We grew up in Houston, but there's parts of Houston you don't really hang out in.
No. So you went over there and picked up.
I got.
What were they costing? What were they charging back then?
So back then they didn't want me. No, putting some Mike Jones on there, but. I think it was like $10. It was pretty cheap, man. Like in like 2001, go out to Acres Home, $10, and you get like a big. Back then, it was the big oversized ones. So I had an oversized white thing with like a bunch of purple drank like dripping all over the shirt. So it was good.
I remember once, like my mom bought me, which is really nice of her, a UNC basketball jersey. And they say the size on it very prominently. And it was like Tyler Hansborough extra small. And she's like, and I actually wore it a lot to box and work out and stuff. But she's like, I thought, for athletics, you don't want something baggy. I'm like, that is very logical. But like, you also wear these to this thing is like skin tight. This is like a workout gear. So it's like, I can't wear this to the game because it wouldn't fit over a t-shirt. And I'm not trying to, it's not really where I'm bringing it to the game.
You're not trying to bring the gun show out.
Not to the game. Not the student section. No, but
that's right.
I still don't know where that is, but I still have it. But yeah, okay. And did you
Tyler Hansborough? God, man, that guy.
Right?
Yeah.
No,
that's. I mean, I know you're a UNC guy, and he took you places, but that's a hard rep, man. That's a hard rep. I don't know if I could rep Tyler.
I mean. Well, you have to, like you said, this is before he played.
Not to diss your mom. Obviously, she's looking out.
It's before he played pro ball. But in fairness to her, I don't even think she knew which player it was. She just went to the student store and bought the first jersey she saw. And this is his college days, right? But most definitely, when a guy in college is known for his hustle, that doesn't project well to the NBA. Like hustle doesn't project particularly well, I would say. It's like, he's Psycho T. He plays real hard. It's like. There are guys that play real hard and are real much bigger. That will be an issue, I think, in the NBA.
Yeah, I think LeBron played hard when he came in. You know, he plays pretty hard.
Yeah,
that's not gonna.
That's not a differentiator.
That's not gonna change things.
No, it's they're not there because they're talented but not working hard. They're 100% of them are working hard.
Oh,
and probably working harder than we know. I think, and you know, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, even my biggest hate, you know, comes at Harden, and you can tell he's working hard at the dinner table too. But he is definitely working hard on like putting into the game the things that are required for him to dominate, doing what he's doing. So it's, all of these players.
So you know what, Liz and I had a conversation about this because she heard the podcast where you were on. Hating on James Harden, and then she Googled it and she looked at some of the pictures you had sent via WhatsApp, some bad images, and I was like, do not believe this. Go watch a video of him just in warm-ups, whatever. He is not overweight. Like, he is absolutely not overweight. That is ridiculous.
I'll give you this. The dude has like one of the weirdest photogenic bodies out there in terms of he can look like 20 pounds overweight, and then you just turn sideways and he looks like, you know,
he's an optical illusion, but he's not overweight. I agree. There are pictures of him that it looks bad, but you know dang well he's a bit of a thicker dude, but he's not overweight. He's in good shape. He's not overweight. Come on.
I don't know. There's definitely a point in when he came back to the Rockets to try to get traded where he was overweight.
That dude was overweight. Point, but that point is not today.
I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like he ever got back to that form prior to him trying to get out of Houston.
All right. Well, I will challenge the last week. Go look at a video, not a picture. I agree. A picture.
I mean, you watch him run those stairs after he had like some victory with the with Embiid, and he's like looking like he's doing all this work. I don't know. I feel like the other factor is the guy has always been sort of he's always been like a gym rat guy. I do think he's strong. Yeah, he's super strong. Yeah, he's super strong. But at a certain point, once you start ticking past 30 and your diet doesn't change and you still put in the work, it's eventually that calculus doesn't work out for you. That balance doesn't work out.
He's carrying more weight than he was when he came out of Arizona State. But so is everybody. I agree. But let's on the topic of hate, how do you feel about how much hate Russell Westbrook has gotten? Because I think they're professional athletes making millions of dollars a year, but he's come out and said like he can't even bring his kids.
Damn near 50 million almost.
Okay, but how do you feel about? Obviously, he's had a bit of a rough go of it, and I've read that he's having statistically one of the worst NBA seasons ever in terms of the negative value he is impacting on his team. So it is clear that he is a negative influence, at least the advanced metrics say it, and I think the eye test would say that. But do you think it's like when he goes into opposing arenas, is it appropriate that he's catching this much salt just every game? Is that something you're here for, or is that like, well, there's a line? And if so, where's the line?
I think the line is like the stuff you're talking about with death threats or him, people like antagonizing his family, like that's insanely out of bounds. But like calling him Westbrick, how is that at all?
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Controversial whatsoever. Like the guy cannot be talking about that as like, that's where I think he brings it on himself. Because it's like, you are a professional, you're getting paid millions of dollars, and part of the experience is that you get applauded when you do great things, you hear boos when you're not doing the right stuff, and especially if you're in an opposing arena, like, look at Trey. Look at Ice Trey. The guy loves it, right? Yeah. He goes to New York. He's like, come on, let's hear it. Yeah. And I'm sure they're saying all types of ridiculous stuff to him. Yeah. But there's a certain way in which a player embraces the hate to become the villain and puts a dagger in your heart. I think the hard part for him is he can't produce. Like you said, he's like all-time bad efficiency when it comes to his usage. Yeah. Like he still has this insane usage, and his shooting percentage is insanely bad. Yeah, I mean, one of the worst, I think, of all time.
Well, it's like when
you do those combinations.
He is. Well, I mean, there's a certain point with these guys. I mean, Bradley Beal, I don't know where he is on the spectrum right now, but if you're a high usage guy, the difference between you being a really big asset and a big negative is 6 percentage points or so of field goal efficiency, right? The NBA is a very competitive market. And so you see these guys go from being, it's like someone at work, if they're high energy and having collaborative good ideas, they're incredibly valuable. If they're high energy and having not so good ideas or being combative with people, they're incredibly negative, right? And I feel like these high usage guys, we're seeing you can actually go from being a top 20 player in the league to a bottom 20 player in the league in 1 year or 2 years. And so I don't know how you feel about it. I think these advanced analytics have exposed this kind of player in a really meaningful way.
I mean, we've seen this tape.
Yeah.
I look at Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
The last 2 years in the league, he just went from, all-time usage to basically you can't play him.
You can't put him on the court because he's only going to play a certain way, right?
Right. He needs to take the shots. He needs to have the ball in his hands. He's going to turn the ball over a bunch, shoot a horrible percentage, and play no D. And he was out of the league in 2 years, right? Took a team on his back to the finals, which Russ has never done.
No.
And he was out of the league in 2 years. You look at other players that sort of found a way to lengthen their careers, and it takes really humbling yourself.
Yeah.
Like you said, on the margin, everything counts so much.
Yeah.
So if you realize, I'm taking a marginal decrease in my efficiency, I need to really, really figure out what to do differently. You look at a person like Carmelo, who was with the Rockets, he was out of the league
they went
for a year.
Yeah.
And he came back to the league and completely took on a new role, decided I'm not going to be a high-usage player. I'm going to be a spot-up shooter for three.
Yeah.
He has a green light to do it, and he's playing in that role and extending his career as a Hall of Famer. But I don't see Russ ever changing his mindset. He's wired that way. He thinks he's the man, and he thinks that, the criticism. The funniest part is, you would think that he has Melo on his team, right? He has a guy who was I remember in OKC when the guy asked him, "Hey, would you come off the bench?" And remember that he's like, "Who, me?"
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Hey, come over here. Paul George, come over here. This guy's asking me if I'm going to come off the bench." Laughing in his face.
Yeah.
And literally that season, he had to come off the bench. So this is the thing where a guy can go from the top to having to drastically change the role, and some people can do it. I don't see Russ doing that.
No.
And even if he tried, what is he going to do?
Well, some people have the skills, I think, to adapt. It takes the skills and the will. I think maybe both are lacking here. Look at a guy like Stephen Marbury. I think he actually had the will. But I don't think he had the skills. And then he's like, well, I'll just go play in China and score 50 points a game, and they'll put a statue up for me, and he's loving it, and sell a bunch of shoes, which is great. He sells his shoes for $20, so love him. But I think he probably might have had the will, but he didn't have the skills. I think Russ has neither the will nor the skills. But I think, like you said, there are other guys that basically, if you're big and you can shoot, you can play in the NBA. So Melo can play in the NBA. Russ is big, but he can't shoot. So that's tough.
Game's predominantly about his athleticism. Yeah. And you can see increasingly when he tries to get to the rim, he's an attacker, which has been great for his team, especially because a lot of teams don't have a guy who's going to get to the rim. Unfortunately, the Lakers have that guy in LeBron. Yeah. So it's a redundant guy in Russ, and he's not finishing at the rim because his athleticism or whatever doesn't allow him to be able to take the contact, finish at the rim anymore, because he used to be like you said, on the margin. He used to be probably 1 or 2 inches closer to the rim. Yeah. And that makes that shot percentage go up tremendously. Yeah. Whereas if you're trying to go full speed at the rim and you got to let go of the ball 3 inches further away, the odds are it's going to miss a lot more.
Yeah. I think what must be so hard for these guys is, I don't know if you've ever been in a context in a recreational sports environment where a pro athlete was there from the sport they played. So David Isle, who's a good friend of ours, played baseball through adulthood. And he told me a story of a relief pitcher, used to be a major league relief pitcher. coming and playing. They wouldn't let him pitch because obviously he would just dominate. The guy's like 35, but he would hit. Sure. And he said he hit a home run like 1 out of 2 times. He was a relief pitcher, but he was just, he played college ball or whatever. He was like on another planet doing outside of his core skill set. He was on another planet. I played flag football in San Francisco. There was a guy that played D1 football as like a receiver, not a star player, not on a big team. He was like literally untouchable. Like people had trouble literally touching this man, like on the field, So they're so much better than mere mortals that I think it must be really hard to accept that when you get, but ultimately, if you looked at skill distribution, 1 inch, 2 inches, it's a super competitive market. And I think it must be so psychologically difficult to accept because like Stephen Marbury, I'm sure the Chinese basketball league, okay, it's not as competitive as the NBA, but these guys they could beat a ton of teams, college teams, I'm sure, honestly, maybe not the top teams, but like these guys are so much better than everybody else that it must be just hard psychologically to come to grips with that. So I can understand not having the will because you've just never developed this muscle,
No, and it's sort of like you live by the sword, die by the sword, because you have to have this like insane amount of confidence to say you're going to be the best player, and to get into the league. So he needed that to get to where he is. He needed that to get to, and I mean, he's a MVP, right? Yeah. That you can't take that away from him. But at this stage in his career, I don't see him. I honestly will predict that at the end of his next contract, I don't think anyone would even give him the minimum to play. No, I
don't. He'll be in the Melo situation, but won't be able to adapt. And I agree with you. Well, let's talk tech. We've talked about on here. We've talked about distributed autonomous organizations. We've talked about NFTs. We've talked about crypto. You brought up a topic on Apecoin, which is some kind of confluence of all three, as far as I can tell. So I've seen these images online. I don't really know what it is. Like, fill me in here. What's going on with Apecoin?
Okay, so I think one of the most recognizable NFTs out there is the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Yep. So it's this very recognizable look of an ape who sort of has a bored face on, but they have different costumes or other looks on them that the NFT creator who made a limited batch of these apes decided, well, there's this finite number of them and they're all going to have a certain amount of decoration and variability, and then according to that, they started becoming like a collectible, right? NFTs are essentially collectibles. Like, it's not that different than
a weird form of collectible, but yes,
a weird form of collectibles in that you don't actually own the picture. No, right? That's the hard part to wrap your mind around. But you own the right to say that you own the picture. Yeah. By pointing to a address on a blockchain that says, I have the keys to this address that points to that picture.
That's right.
Which is a very meta concept, but I don't think that's that hard to wrap your mind around. I think the hard part to wrap your mind around is like, why are those particular collectibles valuable and why would they maintain any value over time? Because the scarcity is really artificial, right? Yes. Like we've gone full circle where we're saying we have a digital system where scarcity is gone because everything's bits and you can just copy anything at any time when you have the JPEG. Yeah. So why are we making this thing up that we want artificial scarcity?
Well, we are to make a market, to make money. That people are doing this for the reason of economics. But so, okay, let's talk about. You said you own a digital signature. You own sort of
the fact that you had to say you own 3 different times and not be able to say what it is you own is probably a bad sign.
Well, exactly. Like there's scarcity of this. There's an ownership of, like, let's say a digital certificate that can be validated that you own it, and that points to a URL or some way of rendering a digital asset. You don't own the rendering. You own the underlying authentication of the rendering or something like this. Let's as a metaphor. So sure, you have to care about owning that, but that I sort of get because people have cared about owning the real
Picasso's.
painting. Yeah, the real Picasso versus like they can't tell the difference between a fake and the real, but they care about the real. It's a little different, but it's the same fundamental idea. But then to your point, Picasso gone. Picasso only painted so many paintings, so like scarcity fully determined. Here, like when you buy, you have this huge counterparty risk that they can just print more, and that seems like really. Now you could talk about smart contracts and limiting and reputation. So like for Top Shot for NBA, maybe they wouldn't do this, but ultimately that feels like a really big risk. But the other side of it is it. Again, is there really a deep market here? Is it really not if it's a fad?
I mean, at these prices, you have to recognize that there's a huge component of this where people have a lot of Bitcoin or crypto, and they need to figure out a way to funnel that out of a taxable event, right? Where they need a way to purchase assets that, when they liquidate them, are no longer going to be taxed.
Which is fine art. Which is the fine art market, also, by the way.
Which is the fine art market.
Yeah.
So when you look at like the prices associated with crypto, with the CryptoPunks, which is another famous NFT collection, and these Bored Apes, like they're so expensive that the only owners of these artwork, these pieces of art, are really people who had tremendous amounts of crypto that they need to figure out how to move outside of just pure crypto.
Or they're just paying themselves, right? I mean, or they're trying to pump and dump on an asset, right? Because you buy your own. It's like if you had a house and bought it 6 times from yourself and the purchase history indicated demand. That's also happening, right? I mean,
that is happening. I think that it's a little harder to do that because the nature of the purchases are traceable on the ledger. So like if a certain wallet buys the crypto, and then it's like the same owner of that wallet, or the funds that went from that wallet go to through a bunch of different intermediaries to a new wallet, you can still see where all the funds go through. So I think it's harder to do that type of stuff now that people are aware of it. I think earlier in the sort of wild west, people were just like being duped into thinking maybe some of this artificial pump and dump stuff was real. But I think most people at this stage in the game, if you're thinking about ponying up, hundreds of thousands of dollars for a pointer to a JPEG, you're not going to be so gullible as to say, oh, I'm just going to buy this thing and not look at the provenance. I mean, that's the one benefit of a fine art market that is entirely on the blockchain, is that provenance is completely detectable.
The fine art market itself is like horrifically underregulated,
or traceable.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's essentially it's very credible people have talked about the prices in the fine art market are insanely influenced by the fact that the provenance of the funds to buy art, and you can move it as a vehicle of value, transfer it across borders, sell it, and so forth. The only thing that made sense in that, in my opinion, idiotic Tenet movie was that there are these free ports that exist to do things like this. And if we want to talk about Tenet,
oh my God.
Right? I was talking to Jeremy, and he was like, I enjoyed it. And I was like, Jeremy, the movie depicts strategic interactions. Let me ask you this. How would two people going in different directions in time play a game of chess? That's a strategic interaction. Start thinking about it for a second, and it falls apart very quickly. It doesn't actually make any sense.
Of all of his previous ones, like, even going back to Memento, like they all had like some level where you're like, okay, I get it. You can't remember. Oh, I get it. There's a temporal distortion when you travel faster than speed or close to the speed of light. Oh, I get it. Even Inception, it's like, okay, you're in a dream.
Dreams.
It's the dreams.
Yeah.
Okay, dreams are something we all understand. But like all time travel movies you have to at least at some level turn your brain off because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
There's inherent, like I love Back to the Future, but
it doesn't make
none
sense.
of that can make any sense. But This one was like so specific about like
it's everywhere. Usually you can hold your nose for the not making sense stuff. This one, the not making sense stuff is like literally bullets coming out of walls, and you're like, where'd the bullet come from? And it's like, don't ask that question. You know, it's like literally, it's like, wait, but
oh my god.
So anyway, but they do have these free ports. So back to Apecoin, you have so what you're saying. So bring me in.
The thing that I think is interesting about Apecoin, outside of like rehashing the old territory of what are NFTs and what's the value, is that now they're taking NFT, the valuation that was generated from all of the purchases of these Apecoins was like, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not $1 billion at the end with that collection. Yeah. So an investor decided, I'm just going to buy all of the Apecoins and the rights to those Apecoins. Not all the Apecoins, not the coins, the NFTs. The NFTs. Yeah. I'm going to buy the rights to the NFTs and then use that as a collateral, so to speak, to generate a token called Apecoin, which then is regulated by a DAO in order for people to generate what they call a utility token, something that actually does something as opposed to a collectible like an NFT.
Okay.
So it's interesting because now you have people, this is like the ultimate dream, is that you take a bunch of money, buy a bunch of collectibles, but then figure out a way to use that as collateral to actually form a real business. So like now you're not just in the fine art market where you're using fine art to launder your money, but you're using fine art to then collateralize an ongoing concern, a business, which is very interesting.
To me, it's interesting if those assets could not have collateralized a business through other means, which essentially implies they're tied up somewhere, somehow, that they wouldn't. I mean, if they're sitting as US dollars in a bank account, those could collateralize a business too. Maybe it appreciates something like this, but you can absolutely do it. So it's sort of taking money from a somehow less legitimate place and legitimizing it is what I'm hearing, because the money can collateralize a business, whether it collateralizes it through NFTs or through a Bank of America statement. I find that equally uninteresting. But if it's taking money that could not have collateralized a business, like Bitcoin holdings held overseas, and then it can, that is. So where do you see the interesting part here?
Well, I think there's a couple interesting angles here. One is that you have, like you said, you sort of have this is a legal way to sort of take your money and money launder it, and then actually look like a very clean investor in a utility token that now has the ability for people to play to earn in a game, right? Yeah. So now you look like Andy Dufresne at the, you went through a mile long tunnel of shit, and now you're clean on the other end. So that's great, except the little detail of the SEC and the regulators, because they're going to see this and say, you just speculatively pumped up this asset over a frenzy, and now you recognize that you might see that asset drop, because a lot of these NFTs have gone, the vast majority of NFTs through their pump and dump cycles go down to very low, percentage points of their original value.
Exactly.
So I think, a few of them will hold their value, and Bored Ape might be one of the few that has some ability to hold the value. But there's, at some point, a ceiling to saying, okay, how many more buyers are there going to be and what can we do with this, right? Like,
if there's no underlying utility, it's either a next person in line or end of the road. And unless there's and that's the same thing with currency. It's just currency. There's usually a utility to it. That is to say other people value
or fine art. It's like dead. It's very dead money, right? Like it's not doing anything. It's not productive. So in that sense, I'm actually pro this approach, in the sense that let's try to get some of this dead money to actually create new real businesses with ongoing concerns that may or may not succeed based on whether people play the game or use the application, right? In that sense, I'm very pro doing this, because you're taking what traditionally was a way for very rich people to just park dead money and get outside of the tax regimes of their countries, and figuring out a way to actually make it where people are forced to reinvest that money some way.
Right. But you can also, I mean, you can do
to
that.
Take on some risk.
Right. But you can also do that with a wealth tax on these assets, right? There's other ways to like, what the inefficiency you're saying is that there's parked assets that could essentially be expansionary economic forces, and those are parked assets.
They are parked assets, and I think that with NFTs, people are very keenly aware that they may be sitting on a bubble, right? When you own a Picasso, you're not really that concerned that asset is going to deflate very rapidly. But if you own an ape,
yeah.
and you're thinking about what does 2035 look like for this ape, you're like, we need to figure out a way to get something out of that. I would rather take the risk of deploying that to like some other real, business risk to make money than just sit on it.
Well, this is like the idea that like, it's a little bit like the idea of why economists fear deflation and like inflation, small amounts, is that deflation creates a wait incentive. Things will get cheaper over time. I will wait. Inflation creates a buy incentive. And what you're saying, this creates like almost a hyper growth incentive that it's either going to be a big successful economy where this valueless thing gains value because of its because its value almost as a currency, or it becomes worthless because its value is a collective in nature. If its intrinsic value is so low, the minute other people stop valuing it is the minute. Whereas Picasso, the intrinsic value is just simply there. Other people value it, but ultimately there's enough people out there that says, I don't care what anyone else values it. I'll put it on my wall in my mansion, and I value it at the backstop is much lower. So I think you're making an interesting point on the time scale by which these ideas are seeing sort of the boom bust maintain cycle, which is super fascinating, versus other ideas. But what I think the wild card here is like, governments control currency because printing money, you control the printing press. Inflation is effectively a tax on everybody. That's why there's going to be hyperinflation in Russia, because they won't be able to meet their obligations, so they'll print money, which means everyone that holds rubles will have lower valued stuff. It's just a tax. Governments historically, this is the one reason nation states can't go broke, because they control the printing press. They can default on their foreign debt. They can do lots of things, but on their domestic debt, they control it. So there's always, to me, in the back of my head, whatever lens it is, if you're designing something that becomes currency-like, and you succeed, some government agency is going to swoop in and say, no, thank you. And I think the shoe will drop in the 2020s. But I know we're almost out of time. I want to get to one thing. Screw up of the week. You called it out in the chat. Fill me in. Kyrie Irving allowed to play in Madison Square Garden, but workers, and he's unvaccinated, but rank and file workers in Madison Square Garden are not.
Yeah, that's the decree from Adams, so basically this background, there was a private sector mandate in New York that all private sector employees needed to be vaccinated. That meaning people who worked at Madison Square Garden, or in the Brooklyn Nets facility. I forgot what it's called. They keep changing the names, but Barclays, I think. Barclays. Yeah. So they have to be vaccinated. So the person selling at the concession stands, all the other labor there have to be vaccinated. But Adams has made a special carve out, only for athletes and performers.
Screw up.
So everybody has to get vaccinated except Kyrie Irving and the baseball players, the Mets players, and all the others who are unvaccinated.
All right, that's a screw up, because that's just straight up nonsense. Either set up policies that everyone can do, like testing policies, or just keep your vaccination policies, or tell Kyrie, with all due respect to the Uncle Drew movie, you can't play. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
All right.
I think this is the ultimate hypocrisy, and he completely earns it. And he was also very coy in that Kyrie said he had an inside line to Eric Adams. He has said, "Don't worry, guys, I'll be playing." And Adams was very coy and saying, I'm not looking at one guy, I'm looking at a city of 9 million.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the rule comes out. Oh, my guy gets the carve out.
I feel like Adams is in the mayor of New York, for people out there. He has appointed a number of family members to prominent positions. I don't think he's had the cleanest run in terms of an anti-corruption perspective. And so disappointing, but to prove, look, we're throwing up a Democrat on the Screw Up of the Week, maybe the first time. It can happen.
There you go.
Corruption out there. Nithin, thank you for your time today. For all the listeners that last week chopped up, appreciate that. Love that we can sub someone in. Hopefully next week maybe we do it the Haters Ball edition with Jeremy back in the mix. I think he was doing a lot of work stuff today. If you're on a podcast platform, remember to subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe, like, share it with your friends. And until our next occasion, we thank you for listening. Any last words from you, Nithin?
No, just repping that H-Town.
All right,
I'll see you guys later.
All right, chop it out.